This is the Edvice Podcast, episode 18. I'm your host, Steven Bauer. Did you know that some bears build nests in trees to sunbathe and rest? You are listening to the Edvice Podcast, your destination for all things education. Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us on another edition of the Edvice Podcast. Joining me today is, I'm sure she wouldn't toot her own horn by saying award or best-selling author, but best-selling author of In Leahs Wake, Terri Giuliano Long. Thank you so much, Terri, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Steven. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, I'm very excited as well. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while. I'm glad we were able to work it out and make it happen. Do you care to give the listeners a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. As you said, my first novel is called In Leahs Wake, so I do primarily focus on my writing right now. I taught part-time at Boston College for 17 years, and I left BC a couple of years ago because I wanted to focus more on my writing, and also we moved to Vermont last year, and so I wasn't able to be on campus, and so I just, felt like it was the right time to do that. So I've been focusing primarily on my writing for the last couple of years. I teach one class a week at a really great place. I hope I have a chance possibly to talk about this a little bit, called Zach's Place, which is an enrichment center for young people, well, actually people of all ages with special needs, and so that's been a really interesting experience for me. I'm a mom. I have four daughters, and I have 6 grandchildren, and I've been married to the same guy for, 4 years. So that's pretty much who I am.
Great. Now, I loved reading your blogs. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to www.edvicepodcast.com and look at the past and future guests section, you'll see Terri and her picture there, and you'll also see a link to her blog. I really liked the one about TV families that you posted. Which TV family is your all-time favorite?
That's so hard. I've been thinking about that, since you sent the question, and I think it's very difficult because TV families never really, they're fun to watch and they're sort of fun to observe, but they never really quite replicate reality in a sense. I think there are always so many problems, and that's kind of the way TV is put together. There has to be tension, and so there's a wonderful classic essay called Crack in the Box by the author Pete Hamill, and I used to use this all the time in my classes, and one of the things I thought was really interesting about this particular essay, and I used it because it was nuanced and it was just a very interesting kind of complex argument to show people. But one of the things I thought was really interesting about it was he talks about how in a half hour, you have this problem and the problems are resolved, and it gives people really unrealistic expectations of what life is about. You have a problem and you just sort of work it out and it's resolved. And I thought that applied a lot to families too, a lot to kids' relationships. I was working with a lot of young people at the time, and I was finding, and even with my own kids, as they grow up, I was finding that kids have this idea that relationships between young people, for example, had to be this, full of this high drama and, fighting and arguing and all this. And I thought, that's what they're getting from television. When I was growing up, we watched shows like Father Knows Best, and it gave, and there were, those problems were always, resolved by this loving family, and it gave people a really unrealistic expectation of what marriage and families were about. The Brady Bunch, shows like that. And now today, you have shows like Ray Donovan, for example, and the family there, nobody gets along. And so you do have, I think, with TV, a really unrealistic expectation of what family life really is, what it should be. I was trying to think of shows. I'm limited, I guess, to the shows that I watch, which are not a whole lot. But one of the shows, families that I think right now that I like right now is the family on Wayward, the main family on Wayward Pines, Ethan, Teresa, and Ben. And what I like about that is that they respect each other. The families, they try to talk, and they can't always talk about the things that are important, but they do talk with one another, and they have a general, just an underlying respect for one another, parents and children. And even though the husband has an affair, you kind of realize, you're told later on in the series, that it was based on this shared trauma, with this other woman. And so there is a recognition there that people do make mistakes, and you can kind of move forward with that. But they're not, but I think it's realistic in the sense that the family has its problems, that they don't always talk through things, but at the same time they try, they care about each other, they respect and love each other, and they do try to understand and to work together and be a family.
There are major disasters that happen within a family, and in real life, it's not forgotten by the next episode. But in a TV show, it's almost like there is no lingering after effects of major decisions that impact a family that go from episode to episode. Now, Parenthood is one of my wife and I's favorite TV show families right now because it seems more real, as you said, than the other ones. If you could become a member of one TV family, which one would you choose? If you could just join them for an episode and get into the shenanigans.
Okay. I was thinking about this as well, and they're, for the most part, I think these families are. I haven't seen Parenthood, so now I'm gonna have to watch that and take a
Netflix.
Look. Yeah.
Love it.
Okay. Oh, okay. Netflix is great, right? I don't know. I mean, I think that the Downton Abbey family is kind of fun, I like that. I liked all that period drama and period, costumes and stuff. So I think that might be kind of fun.
Well, if I could spend one episode within a TV family, it would be without question the Golden Girls. That is my all-time favorite TV show. I own all of the seasons on DVD and get a hard time from people I meet about it. I have a big poster in my man room of the Golden Girls, and that's a good family right there.
That's great. That's good. I forgot all about them.
I've also read that you have traveled across the globe. Is there an image from all of your travels that has really resonated with you and stuck in your mind?
That's a hard question to answer because there are so many. I think the most visual image that comes to mind is the sort of gulf between the really rich and really poor people. And I think you see that in every country to some extent, but in a place like Shanghai, for example, I remember being on the 86th floor in this hotel, and we were on the 86th floor at the time. I think it was the largest, tallest building in the world. And you just feel like you can see the whole world. Shanghai just goes on and on and on and on. And you've got these tremendous riches and this just, really, really, just so much wealth. And then other parts of the city, it's just people just living in complete abject poverty. Same thing in a place like Thailand, for example. You see people living in thatched roof houses with 3 sides and no running water, for example. And, then you'll be on a resort where it's just, there's everything there. And so I think I would have to say that it's kind of seeing that difference between how that gulf between the rich and the poor really can play out.
In your book, Leahs Wake, it tells the story of a girl who's really struggling with the mold or the plan basically that her parents have laid out for her. We want to take a little different perspective as we look at this. And for those of you that would like to find this book, we will tell you right after the interview all the places where you can locate it. But first of all, what was your inspiration for the book?
When I wrote that book, I was in the midst of parenting teens. My husband and I have 4 daughters, and they were all teenagers at the time, and so there was just kind of all this drama and excitement, kind of going on. And the thing that used to bother me as a parent the most at the time was this idea that if a child made a mistake, they would be kind of ostracized from the town, or ostracized from society, essentially, their community. And this happens so many times, and I've seen it, with friends' children and in my own town, where a kid would say there were all these drinking and drug rules, they had these zero tolerance policies in place. And I'm not saying that I think kids should drink or do drugs. I mean, obviously not. But what would happen is, a kid would get in trouble and they'd be caught drinking, they'd be caught doing drugs, and they might be thrown off their team. I had a friend, or I knew someone whose child was, I think, maybe captain, of one of their teams, and they were thrown off the team for the rest of the year. And I always thought, I understand the goal, what they're trying to accomplish. They want the kids to do this. But at the same time, you've got an activity and you've got a sport that might be that one thing that the child has to hold on to, or the thing that might help the child make it stay, make him not completely lose his way. And instead of encouraging them to continue, they say, okay, now you're not on the team anymore, And that just seemed so counterproductive to me. So there was that. And then also at the same time, and again, I understand the drive to this. Parents were so competitive, so everybody wanted to portray this perfect family. My child is the head of this, or the head of that, or doing this, or, doing that, and won this award and that award. And they were always people would be so quick to judge other parents when their child was having trouble. And again, it was the same sort of thing as the zero tolerance policies. I thought, by doing that, by ostracizing these families, by ostracizing these children, all you're doing is pushing them down in the wrong direction, pushing them down the road that you say you don't want them to go down this road, and then you push them that way. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And I think those were the sorts of questions that I was trying to figure out in my mind at the time. And that's really where this story came from.
Well, our society is certainly about the fall or the punishment of someone rather than the building up of. So that is a very good perspective or inspiration for the book. In researching for this book, what were some of the most shocking revelations that you made?
The first book, because I was so involved with the kids and in the midst of this, and there was just so much going on around me that I could see, and that I didn't have to do a whole lot of research. So a lot of it really grew out of questions that I had in my own head that I was trying to work out. What I did have to research, though, were the drug components, what these drugs do, and how they react in the body, and how easy it is or how easy it is to get addicted, or how difficult it is to break an addiction. So that was really interesting, and I've continued to kind of follow that over the years. And right now in Massachusetts, I would imagine in other parts of the country as well, there's a huge explosion in heroin addiction. I forget how many people in Massachusetts have died this year, something like over 1,000. And, there was some of this going on. And when I was in school and when my kids were in school, there was in one particular class, there was a lot of heroin use. And so that really surprised me. I didn't realize that I thought, we had this whole war on drugs, my kids were involved in all these just say no programs and that sort of thing. And, I thought that in regular middle class schools, a lot of that had been eradicated. So I was very surprised to learn that how much this really does go on.
While you were teaching, did you ever have an experience in which a student was maybe previously labeled for either success or failure that surprised you and broke that label?
I did. I think we all do, and that happened probably every year. There was one woman, probably in my maybe third or fourth year teaching, who hadn't been in school she'd been out of school for about 20 years. She had never really done much with writing, and the first class, she came up to me after class and she said, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I don't have what it takes. And I said, no, why don't you give it a chance? I think you do. I think you'll find that you do, and just give us a little bit of a shot and see how it goes. And in the beginning, her first essay was not very good, and we talked about it, and then she asked me if I would meet with her after class, and I met with her a number of times after class, and we talked about her essays, and she would present an essay, and then I would read it and edit it and give her comments and give it back, and she went through this one essay probably 5 or 6 different times, and in the beginning she wouldn't talk up, she wouldn't say anything in class, and by the end of the class, she was starting to become a little bit more vocal. The last night of class, I asked if anybody would like to read their essay, and she did. She said she would read hers, which, was a breakthrough there, just in that. And when she finished the essay, the whole class broke into applause. It was just like this really wonderful moment of, just seeing her. She was beaming, and afterwards, she sent the essay out, and I don't know if it eventually got published, but I know Red Book Magazine expressed an interest in it. So it was just a really, really amazing transformation. And she was, I wouldn't say labeled by other people, but she certainly had herself labeled as somebody who, wasn't going to be able to do this class, wasn't a writer and didn't have what it takes, and really proved that she did.
And every teacher listening to this can attest to the fact that that's why we do what we do, those goosebump moments whenever someone shines.
Absolutely.
that thought they couldn't.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What is your opinion of these labels that we place on students as they enter?
That's a really good question. I think they can be good and bad in a sense. I think that I understand why we do this. I mean, classroom sizes are big. It's not every class is in a private school with 8 children in it, and so to some extent, I think labels or categorization allows us to be able to identify problems and maybe figure out where to allocate resources. So I can understand why people are labeled, and I do to an extent think that sometimes they can be good. So for example, I remember one of my daughters. When she was in, I don't know, maybe 2nd or 3rd grade, they started this gifted and talented program in her elementary school, and she really, really wanted to be in this program, and she wasn't picked in the first round, and she came home and she was really upset about it, and she said, Mom, I really want to do this. And I said, well, why don't you, if this is something you want to do, why don't you write the committee a letter and tell them why you think you should do this. And I didn't help her with this letter at all. I just left that up to her, and she wrote the letter and she was accepted in the program. And I think that being able to self-identify that way is like, okay, I have this, I'm able to be in this group of high achievers. I think, that kind of followed her through her entire school. Her schooling, her education was very successful. And so I think to some extent, sometimes if people are I don't want to say label so much, but if they're given a higher certain expectations, a lot of times I think you find that they can live up to them, and
Right.
at the same time live down to them as well, So there was a student I spoke to the dean at Boston College one time because I had a woman, she was an older woman, and she was this wonderful thinker and really wonderful writer, and she didn't have but she didn't know how to make sentences. I mean, she just couldn't make sentences. The whole paper would be just, sort of one long sentence, or the sentence was broken up in all the wrong places. And it was probably my first year of teaching. I was still in grad school at the time. And I spoke to my grad school advisor, and she said, I think that she had studied learning disabilities. And she said, I think she has dyslexia. And I brought this up to the dean. And I said, how can we handle it? What resources are there? And he said to me, and I've never forgotten that, we're not labeling her. We are not going to label this woman. Help her, do what you can to try to help her through the class and find resources to help her be able to get by. But we're not going to put this label on her. And I understood that as I said, that really stuck with me, because I think that again, labels can work in both ways, or categorizations can work both ways. They can make somebody feel like they're pigeonholed. They're stuck in I am XYZ, whatever the label is. But I think sometimes maybe setting expectations or telling people, yeah, you can write, you are a writer. Sometimes those kinds of things really can help people do things they didn't think they could do.
Yeah, and a lot of times teachers will find that students will live up to their expectations or they'll at least try to live up to their expectations no matter how high or how low you set them.
Exactly.
They're going to try. What can parents do to allow their children to grow into their own person instead of really trying to make them fit into this mold?
That's a really great question. So I've watched a lot of kids grow up in my own experience as a parent. Our grandchildren are very young, so kind of watching what their parents are doing with them. And I have to say I'm really, really encouraged by what I'm seeing with my daughters and their, I guess I don't know if I want to say their generation or their peers. When my kids were growing up, there was this whole self-esteem movement. You want to give everybody a trophy and you want to tell every kid how great they are. And I think in a lot of ways that set up really, first of all, unrealistic expectations, and it also set kids up for a situation. We had this kids who won't take anything less than an A. They just will not accept anything less than an A, and that's fine if they want to work for it. But a lot of times, they just think, well, I'm an A student, and my teachers always said I'm an awesome writer or a fantastic mathematician or whatever it is, and they have this sort of attitude that of kind of entitlement in a sense that they are supposed to always get the A. I think parents today are encouraging their kids, or at least from what I see, a lot of parents are really encouraging their kids to be good people, to share, to appreciate other people, not to people are very aware of, say, bullying, for example, and trying to teach their kids to have respect for other people. And to me, I think this is a very, very positive direction that parenting is going.
If there's a teacher listening to this, hopefully there is. Let me not say if. Teachers listening to this, what are some signs that they can look for in order to be proactive in a situation where a student might be getting involved in drugs or alcohol?
Generally, you're looking for changes in attitudes or behaviors. You know, a child who is an A student is suddenly a C student. They might lose interest in something that they were previously very interested in. They might be on a sports team and they suddenly drop out. They might be the child who is in the back of the classroom with their head down and not talking. They might come to class exhausted. I mean, all of these things could be indicators that a child is getting involved in drinking and drugs. We can talk to them. We can communicate with them. We can encourage them. We can try to some extent to get them to open up. You know, but I don't think we can always help. I think sometimes we just have to accept that, you know, that we also have limitations. So I would say communication again.
Right, and it shows an awful lot. It tells an awful lot about a teacher if a student is willing to open up and communicate. It's all about building those relationships.
Absolutely.
And as teachers, if we build those relationships from even before they enter your classroom. If you're a fourth grade teacher, you start building that relationship when you see them in the hallway in kindergarten. So when they get there, they feel comfortable, and you can maybe help them out.
The times that my kids would open up would be when we were in the car. And I think the reason for that is that you're driving, and so you're looking ahead, and you're not focused, you know, laser focused on them. I think in the classroom, it's sort of the same thing. You know, we're not going to go up to a student and say, hey, what's going on? Sort of like a psychologist. You know, if you were in a therapist's office, they're not going to ask you right away, you know, what happened. They're going to, or what's your problem? They're going to try to establish rapport, try to establish a bond.
Do you care to go ahead and give the listeners a rundown of the new book you have coming out and just basically a little bit about it?
Sure. Thank you. The new book is called Until I Come Home, and it's very understandable that you wouldn't be sure about the date because I've pushed it back quite a few times. I've had a little bit of a problem, not problem, but this book has been really challenging for me. It started out a couple of years ago. I wrote a draft of this book, and I had originally had this idea that when Leah grew up, you know, I was going to tell the story from her perspective as a 30-year-old, and I saw her working as a therapist for people who have been trafficked. And so the idea kind of came from there. And ultimately I decided to work with a new family. You know, I felt like the Tyler story was finished and I wanted to go on. But that was kind of where the story started, sort of germinated there. And so I wrote the first draft of a story from the perspective of this 30-year-old woman who was working as a counselor for girls, young people who have been trafficked. And when I finished the draft, I finished the whole draft one summer, and when I finished it, I showed it to my assistant, and she said, this isn't a book, this is like 3 books, you know. So I had to kind of pull it apart, and then I thought, well, you know, maybe I can just do something kind of short, like a prologue to the story. And so I started this Until I Come Home as a prologue to that story, and that ended up becoming a novel of its own. So that's what I'm working on right now. A young woman she had a child when she was 17 or 16, and she left home, and now 15 years have gone by, and she left the child with her mother. The child is now 16 years old, and her mother has always felt really guilty, as though you know, it was her fault that her daughter ran away, and she's just always, you know, she's very protective of her granddaughter because she doesn't want the same thing, obviously, to happen again, and, you know, kind of a little smothering for that reason. And so the mother, for the first time, is going away across the country with her husband, and the daughter is staying at home with her uncle, who's kind of irresponsible. He's a single guy, you know, he's like 40 and he doesn't have any kids, and he you know, kind of wants to be the good guy and lets the girls do what they want. And so the whole story takes place over a weekend, and it's really about trying to come to terms with this loss, you know, of this tremendous loss of a mother and a daughter, and, you know, what that means to how do you go on from there, you know, how do you move on?
Man, and this whole issue of human trafficking, people don't realize the extent in our own
Oh my
country,
goodness.
and that it's not just. I mean, the majority. Don't get me wrong, are women and girls, but there are men and boys also that are included in this human trafficking.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it is mind-blowing, it's sickening at the same time, and it's something that needs to be brought to the forefront and discussed and handled in our own country as well. So it's great that you're writing this book, and hopefully it will. If you would like to follow Terri Giuliano Long on Twitter, you can follow her at TG Long, that is at TGLONG, and you can also visit her website, that is http:// all that good stuff, blog.tglong.com, and there's another /, or you can find the link to that on our website. Terri, thank you so much for your time. This has been such an awesome discussion.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
No problem at all. We really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate your inviting me on. You asked really interesting, intriguing questions, and I really enjoyed talking with you. So thank you. It was really great to be here.
No problem at all. You have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to the Edvice Podcast. And remember, when it comes to your students, embrace, engage, and empower.